Hello, today we have an ACIM reading. It is Chapter 7, The Gifts of the Kingdom, Section 6, From Vigilance to Peace. Although you can love the sonship only as one, you can perceive it as fragmented. It is impossible, however, to see something in part of it that you will not attribute to all of it. That is why attack is never discrete and why it must be relinquished entirely. If it is not relinquished entirely, it is not relinquished at all. Fear and love make or create, depending on whether the ego or the Holy Spirit begets or inspires them. But they will return to the mind of the thinker, and they will affect his total perception. That includes his concept of God, of his creations, and of his own, of his, capital H, God's creations, and of his own. So it will affect the concept of everything. He will not appreciate any of them, capital T in them, so any of the creations of God, if he regards them fearfully. So when I'm projecting fear outward onto what appear to be separate things, I'm regarding the creations of God fearfully. The creations of God, love extending forever. That's what's really there, but what I'm seeing are all these fearful projections, and then I'm judging them either positively or negatively, so I'm keeping the fearful projections instead of allowing the love to extend. So he will appreciate all of them, capital T, all of God's creations, if he regards them, all God's creations, with love. And to regard God's creations with love, I have to look past my fearful projections. So past anything that looks separate, past anything that I would judge positively or negatively, past that to God's eternal creations of love. So looking past. Okay. So what stands out there to me is he will not appreciate any of them if he regards them fearfully. And I know when I'm regarding a creation of God fearfully, I feel disturbed in some way. And the example that comes to mind is when I'm reading people's writings about A Course in Miracles, and it appears that the writer analyzes a fellow student or another teacher, or everybody's a teacher and student at the same time, so we're all therapists and patients at the same time. Let us look past our service to where we're joined. But that one seems to get me, and I'll fall in the little hole of thinking somebody's making a mistake. They're forgetting who their brother is. They think someone's got the course wrong. They think someone's interpreting the course wrong. But they don't see, they forgot to look through the surface. The funny part about that is, in that very moment I've analyzed that one. I've boiled them down to a point. I've made them separate. I've said who they are and who they aren't. I've criticized them. The one who seemed to be making the analysis, that was my fearful projection. A brother analyzing. And I myself, I have to accept the atonement for myself. I have to look through the fearful projection I made to the light of clarity right beyond it, and put that in charge. So that's always my invitation. He will not appreciate any of God's creations if he regards them fearfully. So I can't do anything but be with God's creations. That's all that's actually here. But I can feel when I'm interpreting them fearfully, so I can go within to ask for assistance. Okay. The mind, this is paragraph 2, the mind that accepts attack cannot love. That is because it believes it can destroy love. So whenever I feel disturbed, I'm believing I can destroy love. There's the pointer. Hey, you still believe this? Maybe you could set that belief down. And therefore does not understand what love is. If it does not understand what love is, it cannot perceive itself as loving. This loses the awareness of being, induces feelings of unreality, and results in utter confusion. Your thinking has done this because of its power. But your thinking can also save you from this because its power is not of your making. Your ability to direct your thinking as you choose is part of its power. If you do not believe you can do this, you have denied the power of your thought and thus rendered it powerless in your belief. So thought is an important part of this. And what stands out is your thinking has done this. What is this? Losing the awareness of being, inducing feelings of unreality, resulting in utter confusion. Because of its power, our thinking is powerful, but your thinking can also save you from this, from the confusion, from losing the awareness of being. It can point back toward the awareness of being, because its power is not of your making. So I didn't make the power of my thinking. Everything draws on love for its existence or its apparent existence. Even the ego has to use love's power to seem to exist. Everything points back to love. But the inspired thoughts that Spirit can give me point directly back to Spirit and everyone and everything. And those are very helpful. So, for example, all the lessons in A Course in Miracles, all those inspired thoughts point directly back to Spirit, point directly back to what we can see immediately behind any fearful surface we're projecting. Your thinking has done this, resulted in utter confusion, lost the awareness of being, induced feelings of unreality because of its power. But your thinking can also save you from this confusion because its power is not of your making. We didn't make anything. We made nothing. Ego's nothing. All our fearful projections are nothing and they're meaningless. And what are we? We're love, and love's power is here to assist us. And one of the tools love is going to use is loving thought. And that is not for an ego to judge. This is loving thought or this is not. We just turn consistently within. We can use the lessons in A Course in Miracles as helpers, and we focus where Spirit actually is, and we allow Spirit to inspire us, and we have the willingness to see through the surface to what is actually here. Okay, paragraph 3. The ingeniousness of the ego to preserve itself is enormous, but it stems from the very power of the mind the ego denies. This means that the ego attacks what is preserving it, which must result in extreme anxiety. That is why the ego never recognizes what it is doing. It is perfectly logical, but clearly insane. The ego draws upon the one source that is totally inimical to its existence for existence. Fearful of perceiving the power of this source, it is forced to depreciate it. So, when I feel fearful, if I can really get down to it, I'm fearful of perceiving the power of love or of God. That's what I'm fearful of. And ego's guiding me in this. So ego's ingenious. It's going to tell me you're afraid something's going to happen to the body. You're afraid something's going to go wrong. You're afraid of disaster. You're afraid of this. You're afraid of that. But really, I'm fearful of perceiving the power of love. So fearful of perceiving the power of this source, it is forced to depreciate it. This threatens its own existence, a state which it finds intolerable. Remaining logical but still insane, the ego resolves this completely insane dilemma in a completely insane way. It does not perceive its existence as threatened by projecting the threat onto you and perceiving your being as non-existent. So that's how we lose the awareness of being, of our shared being, because ego has been projecting threat, and we've been focusing on the illusion of threat. It's been projecting, and then we forget we're shared being, we're always safe, our very nature is safety. This ensures its continuance if you side with it by guaranteeing that you will not know your own safety. So every day we have the opportunity to accept the awareness of our own safety, and every little bit of our experience helps us receive this teaching, accept this teaching, perceive, have our corrections, have our perceptions corrected, so we can see everything as a pointer to what's actually real. So what stood out here is this means that the ego attacks what is preserving it, which must result in extreme anxiety. So when I don't feel good in any way, angry, irritated, anxious, anything, I'm believing ego attack thoughts, and these thoughts are attacking love, or they're attacking my being and yours. They're attacking what actually is. So it's just the ego attacking reality. And if I have opportunities to stop and look at it through that lens, that's helpful, even if it's after the fact. Last night I felt too afraid to take my husband's car out under certain conditions and weather. My van is in the shop, so I just didn't go anywhere. I felt too afraid. I couldn't get over the fear. And this is like the second day in a row I had a fear I couldn't see my way through. But now I can see, not that I should have gone or should have stayed home. It's not really that. I can see in that fear, I was looking at that fear at the time, and I can see I was believing thoughts that attack love. That doesn't mean I have to force my perceived self into certain actions if I'm not genuinely there. If I don't feel genuinely safe, I don't have to force anything. But if I do feel fearful, it's an opportunity. And I certainly believed the thought, I'm going to crash, I'm going to slide, I'm going to slip, I'm going to total a car. Because in my past, this is an experience I had. So I can at least watch it working and set the thoughts aside and remember something true. And what's something true? No matter what I end up doing, what could I focus on instead of that? Well, the lesson I'm focusing on today is sickness is but another name for sin. Well, sickness is all mental, whether it appears to be physical or mental. And if I'm scared of slipping on the ice, I'm mentally ill. Okay. So sickness is but another name for sin. Healing is but another name for God. The miracle is thus a call to Him. So I can call to God, and through opening up to the miracle. And it's okay if we still have fearful experiences, and if we still act in accordance with our fear. We never have to force anything, but we can always just take a look at it. And even seemingly after the fact, if it comes to mind again, we can take that invitation and we can rest in the reminder of what is real. And that's calming, that's helpful. Okay, just seeing if there's any more I want to say about that. The ego attacks what is preserving it, which must result in extreme anxiety. Yeah, one more thing. If I think I see that anxiety in someone else, I'm just projecting it. So if I feel uncomfortable because it seems somebody else is uncomfortable, that's my anxiety. And I'm always attacking myself, my true self, in thought. And I can always learn to set those thoughts aside and refocus on the miracle. The miracle can correct our perception. Or I could say, I have done this thing I'm seeing, what I'm perceiving, I've made this, and it is this I would undo. Just practice and learn to be in that setting. Okay. The ego cannot afford to know anything. This is paragraph 4. Knowledge is total, and the ego does not believe in totality. This unbelief is its origin, and while the ego does not love you, it is faithful to its own antecedents, begetting as it was begotten. Mind always reproduces as it was produced. Produced by fear, the ego reproduces fear. This is its allegiance, and this allegiance makes it treacherous to love, because you are love. Love is your power, which the ego must deny, and must also deny everything this power gives you because it gives you everything. No one who has everything wants the ego. Its own maker, then, does not want it. Rejection is therefore the only decision the ego could possibly encounter if the mind that made it knew itself, and if it recognized any part of the sonship, it would know itself. So that's our key, to look at any part of the sonship and see our very self through that surface, whatever surface we're throwing up. In front of our very self that we share, we can look through any seemingly separate part of the sonship and see that shared self. And our willingness to stop and do this has an effect on our daily experience, on what we tend to perceive. No one who has everything wants the ego. So it can just be very calming to focus on that. Everyone has everything, and if it appears that they don't, that's my fearful projection. So accepting the atonement for myself means turning towards Spirit and saying, I don't know anything, but you can show me. And we get the opportunity to remember this many times a day. Why? Because we have those moments when we don't feel good. Maybe we feel anxious over someone else's anxiety. Well, it looks that way. Maybe we feel scared of icy roads. Whatever it is, it gives, and no matter how the situation ends up, we don't have to judge any of that positively or negatively. It gives us that opportunity to understand what the problem is. Here I am having everything, and here everyone is having everything, and we don't appear to know it. So in this state of affairs, really Spirit, which is what we all are together, is the solution. And let me turn towards Spirit for a little while and rest, and then move on, inspired, in willingness. Okay. Paragraph 5. The ego therefore opposes all appreciation, all recognition, all sane perception, and all knowledge. It perceives their threat as total because it senses that all commitments the mind makes are total. Forced, therefore, to detach itself from you, it is willing to attach itself to anything else. But there is nothing else. The mind can, however, make up illusions, and if it does so, it will believe in them because that is how it made them. So what stands out is the mind can, however, make up illusions, and if it does so, it will believe in them because that is how it made them. As I go through this learning and unlearning process, I become more and more sensitive to how I feel, and I notice how pervasive an underlying feeling of anxiety or lack of ease is. And sometimes I'll think, oh, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Well, believing the illusions are real and trying to find my stability or meaning in them through analyzing them causes anxiety. So as I become more, or irritation, or rage, or it's all the same, or boredom, or fatigue, or physical illness, it causes all those things, all those experiences. So when I can see what causes those experiences, not something in the details of the world I projected, but the very fact that I believe the thoughts that bring the world here for me to see right in front of me, there's an anxiety there. I'm going to get in trouble for this. This is wrong. I've done wrong. I can stop many times a day and address that by pausing, noticing what I've just been thinking, setting that aside, focusing, refocusing. So whenever I feel that mental illness of any lack of ease whatsoever, sickness is but another name for sin. Healing is but another name for God. The miracle is thus a call to Him. and I can rest there, remembering miracles will undo what I have done in making illusions, and I can allow the perception to be corrected. I definitely need help in this moment because of how I feel, and trying to drill further into action to fix things, or trying to get a sense of stability by blaming someone else and taking refuge in an identity that's separate from theirs, that's never going to work. I'm finally seeing that will never work. So I have to stop and rest in what does work. Sickness, my mental illness, any lack of ease I have is but another name for sin. Healing is but another name for God. The miracle is thus a call to Him. So I can stop and call. Stop and call many times a day, because that's the remedy I need. The mind can, however, make up illusions, and if it does so, it will believe in them because that is how it made them. So if you think of this, all the illusions you see, everything sensory, everything that we believe in, I believe in the ice and the snow and the slipperiness. So if it makes up illusions, it will believe in them because that is how it made them. I made these illusions through believing thoughts. That is how it made them. I made these illusions through believing thoughts. And that's why it's helpful to notice the exact thought I'm thinking. Look, here's an illusion I made. And not like I have to pretend ice isn't slippery. I'm going to go out there and no, not until it really genuinely comes to me. Like, you're perfectly good, you're fine, go ahead. If I'm still believing in my illusions, is okay, because I've begun to question them, and I've begun to turn toward God, and I've begun to remember the miracle. I've remembered to pause and say, I have done this thing, and it is this I would undo. So all of that's helpful because of the willingness to pause and because of the orientation. Yeah, I actually had to pause in the reading of this because some guilt came up, and I thought, well, if you had been practicing this correctly, you just wouldn't feel the fear. But feeling the fear is part of the undoing. We have to notice that it's here. And then what came to mind was somebody in a Facebook group. And this being, my fearful projection, my illusion of him goes like this. He'll come into a conversation and say, but I'm happy, I'm the happiest that's ever been, and I have miracles all the time, and I have a beautiful life. And the subtext I would assign it to him is, and you should too. And so why don't you? So you must be doing it wrong. If you did it like me, you'd have this wonderful, magical life that I have. And so the instinct is to attack him and analyze him and say why he's wrong or incorrect, or say his life must not really be like that, right? But I can see that whole facade, what I see him as, is my own fearful projection. That's the illusion. I have done this, and it is this I would undo. And now I can call on the miracle to help me see this being as he truly is. We go together, you and I. The Holy Spirit can bring us both together into a moment of genuine peace, together as one. And that can be done mind to mind. On Facebook, you may never see a body representing the person, and that doesn't matter. You're just thinking of a being, and you're remembering your equality in being, and you're remembering that none of these illusions ever happened, and you're remembering that every illusion you experienced, you made up. So all of these interactions and our experiences are opportunities to let all the nonsense fall down and to remember what is actually here. Okay, paragraph 6. The Holy Spirit undoes illusions without attacking them because he cannot perceive them at all. They therefore do not exist for him. Doesn't that sound wonderful? He resolves the apparent conflict they engender by perceiving conflict as meaningless. I have said before that the Holy Spirit perceives the conflict exactly as it is, and it is meaningless. The Holy Spirit does not want you to understand conflict. He wants you to realize that because conflict is meaningless, it is not understandable. Yes, this is why I cannot attempt to analyze or compare the fearful surfaces I'm projecting, because none of them ever meant anything. And those fearful surfaces are what we get attached to and think we love, so there's some confusion to be undone there. Okay. As I have already said, understanding brings appreciation, and appreciation brings love. Nothing else can be understood, because nothing else is real, and therefore nothing else has meaning. So the person in the Facebook group that I was talking about, if I just am brought together with him in simple being in the mind, and I can see that no illusion I projected on him was ever true, and we're just beings together, there's nothing to understand here. And that's when we can have a simple moment of peace. So what stood out is he resolves the apparent conflict they engender. The Holy Spirit resolves the apparent conflict illusions engender by perceiving conflict as meaningless. So I have that opportunity when I feel a sense of conflict, because I think, well, I want to go to my sister's, but I perceive the road as icy. I don't have to be afraid. I can just take a moment to see this conflict is meaningless, and then turn inward towards spirit and spend that time in willingness to be guided. And whatever happens, happens. There's no triumph over ice. There's no failure to take on the ice. There's just, it's okay. But you've looked at it. At least you've looked at it. Okay. The Holy Spirit resolves the apparent conflict illusions engender by perceiving conflict as meaningless. And when I think there's a problem with a person, with any person, the person is my own fearful projection, and the being is the reality. So I can remember the apparent difference between this person and myself, the apparent conflict of perspectives, doesn't mean anything. So I shouldn't go there to find the meaning. All the meaning is in what the ego can't understand. So if I go to spirit and I rest, then spirit can give me what I need. So I rest in the being behind my own fearful projection. Sickness is but another name for sin, my fearful projection. Healing is but another name for God. The miracle is thus a call to him. I'm going to read the rest of the lesson. Father, you promised you would never fail to answer any call your son might make to you. It does not matter where he is, what seems to be his problem, nor what he believes he has become. He is your son, and you will answer him. The miracle reflects your love, and thus it answers him. Your name replaces every thought of sin, and who is sinless cannot suffer pain. Your name gives answer to your son, because to call your name is but to call his own. So we can come very softly into this remembrance. I just had to stop and pause a minute because I was thinking, oh, this is long. This recording is getting long. And my mind started being overtaken with it. So I had to stop and address it. Okay. So paragraph 7. If you will keep in mind what the Holy Spirit offers you, you cannot be vigilant for anything but God and his kingdom. The only reason you may find this hard to accept is because you may still think there is something else. Belief does not require vigilance unless it is conflicted. If it is, there are conflicting components within it that have led to a state of war, and vigilance has therefore become essential. Vigilance has no place in peace. It is necessary against beliefs that are not true, and would never have been called upon by the Holy Spirit if you had not believed the untrue. This is making me laugh because when I was younger, my sister kept telling me that the word was vigilance. And she said it so often that every time I say vigilance now, I really have to look at the word. And she also said the word was strategy, not strategy. So now every time I say strategy, I'm careful, like it's T first. It's just like I have to relearn the word. But she didn't cause this tendency toward mispronunciation or fear of mispronunciation. I can look behind my fearful projection and see the being. But I have to admit, when I see the word vigilance, doubt will come in and I think, did I just say vigilance? All right, so anyhow, when you believe something, you have made it true for you. Yeah, and it's like, can we make true that the word is pronounced the other way? Will you believe it? Yeah, you can. You can get fooled, and that's what this is. We've let ourselves be fooled, and it's okay because it can be undone. When you believe what God does not know, your thought seems to contradict His, and this makes it appear as if you are attacking Him. Okay, so this got highlighted. It is necessary, vigilance. It is necessary against beliefs that are not true. Okay, I paused for a minute, so I'm going to go back over it. Vigilance. Oh, I just did it. Vigilance. Vigilance is necessary against beliefs that are not true, and would never have been called upon by the Holy Spirit if you had not believed the untrue. I'm just going to go over it again. Vigilance is necessary against beliefs that are not true, and would never have been called upon by the Holy Spirit if you had not believed the untrue. So there's a part we need to play. There's one place for our effort to be, and that is in vigilance. And that means being aware of how I feel and owning that and keeping it very close to home. Never, I'm going to do it, but never analyzing anyone or anything else and saying they don't get it or they're wrong. This is where they get the course wrong. This is where they fail. No. I have to accept the atonement for myself. And I have to see that I'm the one shooting those fearful projections up there, and I'm trying to cover up what they are. And every time I notice I don't feel good, that's what I'm engaged in. If I don't notice and admit that I feel a lack of ease, if I try to paper that over with concepts, it's not going to work. I really do need to stop every time I feel that lack of ease and address it to the fullest extent I can. And we get better and better at it and more committed because we understand what the real problem is. I am projecting fearfully. I need to see past my fearful projections, and I'm not in a place where I can analyze anything for anyone else. I can share my experience, I can share what I've come to see, but I cannot label and analyze. I can look at you and think you're the fear I'm projecting on you, or I can look at you and recognize that you're the very simple and beautiful being behind what I projected upon you, and I can agree to not misuse the idea of you to serve the ego. So vigilance is necessary against beliefs. There is an against here. Spirit is all flow and beauty, but there is an against right here because we need vigilance to counter beliefs that are not true. and vigilance would never have been called upon by the Holy Spirit if you had not believed the untrue. So anytime I experience what I call a problem, the problem is that I'm believing the untrue. And that doesn't mean that practical solutions don't come. I mean, this morning I was shoveling the snow off the driveway, contemplating which shovel to use, and decided on the yellow, wider snowplow one. And we're having experiences. It seems we have decision points, but what we can do is really value stopping to turn to Spirit often throughout the day. So it's Spirit assisting us through all of these apparent decision points and not ego. And that's what the vigilance is for, because we're happy when Spirit is assisting us, not happy about surfaces. That's the ego's fake happiness that's going to crash eventually. So we come to recognize we're happy when Spirit is assisting us. We're unhappy when ego is assisting us. Okay, paragraph 8. I have repeatedly emphasized that the ego does believe it can attack God and tries to persuade you that you have done this. If the mind cannot attack, the ego proceeds perfectly logically to the belief that you must be a body. By not seeing you as you are, it can see itself as it wants to be. Aware of its weakness, the ego wants your allegiance, but not as you really are. The ego therefore wants to engage your mind in its own delusional system, because otherwise the light of your understanding would dispel it. So isn't that good news? The light of our understanding can dispel the ego. The light of my understanding can dispel the ego I built for myself and the ego I built for you. So that's a very beautiful thing. It wants no part of truth because the ego itself is not true. If truth is total, the untrue cannot exist. I could just take a bath in that. The untrue cannot exist. Commitment to either must be total. They cannot coexist in your mind without splitting it. And anytime I feel anything not good, it's the indicator of the split mind. But it's okay, because the remedy's right here. I just have to keep turning toward the remedy. If they cannot coexist in peace, and if you want peace, you must give up the idea of conflict entirely and for all time. Lest we begin to judge one another. Oh, the temptation. None of us has given up the idea of conflict entirely and for all time, other than those beings who are in the non-physical assisting us. They have. And Jesus, right? They have. But if we're here having this experience, it's because we're hanging on to both the idea of time and the idea of conflict. And I'll never get tired of saying an abstraction at the end of time, because one on earth who has given up the idea of conflict entirely and for all time is an abstraction at the end of time. To remain seemingly on earth here, you have to even agree to hold on to a shred of it to even appear physically. So there simply cannot be comparison between persons. I mean, there can be in our fantasy, but really we cannot compare beings because beings are equal. And this is where we can get into a distorted teacher, follower, learner, student type of situation where we forget that, where I have gotten into this. The simplest thing is for me to see behind the fearful facade I have projected, whether it's a fearful facade I'm valuing or devaluing. So if I'm valuing somebody as knowing more than I am and being superior, I've lost the plot, and I need to pause and regain it and see the simplicity of our equality and enjoy that. Take a moment to enjoy it. This requires vigilance only as long as you do not recognize what is true. So if I'm evaluating us differently, I don't recognize what is true. If I'm saying this one gets it and that one doesn't, I don't get it. That's okay. It's okay that I don't get it, because help is here. Help is here within us all. And help helps. Help will help me today. That's okay. While you believe two totally contradictory thought systems share truth, your need for vigilance is apparent. So that's what stood out to me. While you believe that two totally contradictory thought systems share truth, your need for vigilance is apparent. When I don't feel good, when I don't feel sure, when I want to criticize, I believe that two totally contradictory thought systems share truth. And that is my problem. So instead of trying to say what the problem is with somebody else, I can stop and recognize, I believe that two totally contradictory thought systems share truth. I need help. And then I can accept the help that is here for me in that belief. Imagine if I could set that belief down today, entirely and for all time. It only takes one of us to do it, and then it gets shared with all of us. While you believe that two totally contradictory thought systems share truth, your need for vigilance is apparent. We have to be aware of how we feel, and we have to be aware that when we don't feel good, we ourselves are or when we're finding a problem anywhere, we ourselves are believing that two totally contradictory thought systems share truth. And when one of us lets this go, it's over for all of us. That's a beautiful and reassuring thing. And if you look at all of us addressing this problem together, walking each other home together, we're in good hands. Paragraph 9. Your mind is dividing its allegiance between two kingdoms, and you are totally committed to neither. Your identification with the kingdom is totally beyond question except by you, when you are thinking insanely. What you are is not established by your perception, and is not influenced by it at all. Perceived problems and identification at any level are not problems of fact. They are problems of understanding, since their presence implies a belief that what you are is up to you to decide. The ego believes this totally, being fully committed to it. It is not true. The ego, therefore, is totally committed to untruth, perceiving in total contradiction to the Holy Spirit and to the knowledge of God. Well, that's comprehensive. So, what you are is not established by your perception, and it is not influenced by it by all. It is... Sorry, I'm going to start again. What you are is not established by your perception and is not influenced by it at all. And when I have a problem with the ice, I can just pause and remember, what I am is not established by my perception, and it is not influenced by it at all. When I have a problem with a person, with a spiritual teacher, that's my favorite. Let's find a fault with a spiritual teacher. It's my hobby. That's my candy. Okay. What you are with that spiritual teacher is not established by your perception. My perception is my fearful projection, or when I learn to extend love, then my perception is loving. And my perception can be corrected. So what you are is not established by your perception and is not influenced by it at all. It's totally free of my perception. What I am with that spiritual teacher and with you is completely free of my perception and of any of ego's positive or negative judgments of my perception. Okay, paragraph 10. You can be perceived with meaning only by the Holy Spirit because your being is the knowledge of God. Any belief you accept apart from this will obscure God's voice in you and will therefore obscure God to you. Unless you perceive His creation truly, you cannot know the Creator, since God and His creation are not separate. The oneness of the Creator and the creation is your wholeness, your sanity, and your limitless power. This limitless power is God's gift to you because it is what you are. If you dissociate your mind from it, you are perceiving the most powerful force in the universe as if it were weak, because you do not believe you are part of it. So when I feel disturbed, I am doing this. I'm perceiving the most powerful force in the universe as if it were weak. Let's say I find a fault with a person. You know what I'm doing? I'm perceiving the most powerful force in the universe as if it were weak. At least I know what I'm up to. That's helpful. So what stood out there is you can be perceived with meaning only by the Holy Spirit because your being is the knowledge of God. It is the knowledge of God. As italicized. So who can perceive me with meaning? Not a person. So any work I do to try to impress or affect persons is unnecessary. I can be perceived with meaning by the Spirit in you, by the Spirit in anyone. And that's all that's necessary. Nothing else is necessary. It becomes very simple. Spirit is very simple. It is everywhere. And it's the only thing that can perceive me with meaning. So I don't have to struggle to achieve having my person be perceived with meaning. That's unnecessary. You can be perceived with meaning only by the Holy Spirit because your being is the knowledge of God. And anytime I feel disturbed, I'm denying the knowledge of God. Anytime I'm critical of any facet of the illusion I'm experiencing, I am denying the knowledge of God. I am denying my shared being. My shared being is present behind every fearful projection of mine. And I can stop and remember that. Okay, just finding my place. Paragraph 11. Perceived without your part in it, God's creation is seen as weak, and those who see themselves as weakened do attack. The attack must be blind, however, because there is nothing to attack. Therefore they make up images, perceive them as unworthy, and attack them for their unworthiness. That is all the world of the ego is. Nothing. It has no meaning. It does not exist. Do not try to understand it, because if you do, you are believing that it can be understood, and is therefore capable of being appreciated and loved. That would justify its existence, which cannot be justified. You cannot make the meaningless meaningful. This can only be an insane attempt. The attack must be blind, however, because there is nothing to attack. So when I want to be critical, or when I want to blame, I'm allowing the ego to orient me toward an attack on nothing. In seeing that way, of course it's silly every single time, no matter how serious the situation appears to be. It's silly to be influenced by someone whispering in your ear to attack nothing. Of course you don't have to attack nothing. The attack must be blind, however, because there is nothing to attack. And when I want to find fault with someone or something, that desire to attack and to blame and to find fault in a particular place, my problem is that I'm blind, and I can turn towards Spirit and ask for help to see. Maybe I could see this differently. Maybe I could see this differently. Okay, paragraph 12. Allowing insanity to enter your mind means that you have not judged sanity as wholly desirable. If you want something else, you will make something else, because it is something else, but because it is something else, it will attack your thought system and divide your allegiance, slicing and dicing. You cannot create in this divided state, and you must be vigilant against this divided state, because only peace can be extended. Only love can be extended. Only peace can be extended. Only sanity can be extended. Oh, I think I just lost my place. I looked away for a minute. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. Your divided mind is blocking the extension of the kingdom, and its extension is your joy. If you do not extend the kingdom, you are not thinking with your Creator and creating as He created. So, what stood out there is your divided mind is blocking the extension of the kingdom, and its extension is your joy. So let's say I encounter a problem in my day, and it seems the problem must be solved. First, I need to check in with how I feel, because what's going to bring the solution to the problem to me? Spirit, I'd rather have spirit handle it than ego. And if I'm oriented toward ego, it's going to be harder for me. So I can be divinely selfish and take a moment to stop and see any tension I feel. The problem is not the problem seemingly in the world, is that my divided mind is blocking the extension of the kingdom, and its extension is my joy. So the extension of the kingdom is present within everyone in that situation and everything in that situation. And if I can get into the setting of allowing peace and joy and love to extend from within everyone and everything in that situation without trying to analyze anything, then I can allow solutions to flow as they're needed. Your divided mind is blocking the extension of the kingdom, and its extension is your joy. So when I'm with anyone, I can remember extension. And if I feel any hesitation, any doubt, I can remember my problem is my divided mind is blocking extension. Extension is here. I'm allowing my mind to block it, and that's optional. So from that perspective, we can go to Spirit and ask for help, knowing what the problem is, and knowing it's Spirit's help we need. It's not something we need to manipulate in our outer world to fix things. Okay. Paragraph 13. In this depressing state, the Holy Spirit reminds you gently that you are sad because you are not fulfilling your function as co-creator with God, and are therefore depriving yourself of joy. This is not God's choice, but yours. If your mind could be out of accord with God's, you would be willing without meaning. There's something I don't get there. Oh, okay. If it were possible that your mind could be out of accord with God's, you would be willing without meaning. Yes, yet because God's will is unchangeable, no conflict of will is possible. So our will is God's will forever, even if we perceive differently. There's only one will, one true will. This is the Holy Spirit's perfectly consistent teaching. Creation, not separation, is your will, because it is God's, and nothing that opposes this means anything at all. Being a perfect accomplishment, the sonship can only accomplish perfectly, extending the joy in which it was created, and identifying itself with both its creator and its creations, knowing they are one. And if we exempt any of these creations, we've turned toward ego and said, show me the way. So we don't want to make any exclusions here. Okay. Creation, not separation, is your will because it is God's, and nothing that opposes this means anything at all. So in a moment of tension, one thing we can turn inward and remember is creation is my will, not separation. My true will is God's will. It's not what this ego will appears to be. The ego thinks it wants particular things and doesn't want particular things. And I can stop to tune into my true will. My true will is not for separation, not for anything that separation could seem to give me. It's my true will is for creation. And just taking that little rest, that moment, can be very helpful. Creation, not separation, is your will because it is God's, and nothing that opposes this means anything at all. If I'm looking at somebody else and I have even the finest, tiniest, little microscopic hair of a criticism of that one, I'm seeing them as a person, not as a being. And I have the opportunity to remember and to share with them the power of sharing with them. Creation, not separation, is your will because it is God's. And to say, that's a being, and that being shares the will for creation, not separation, with God. That's who's really there. I was looking at a surface of fear I was projecting upon the being that shares the will for creation with God. And now I can see, oh gosh, look who's behind there. It's a being that shares the will for creation with God. Okay, that's the whole section. So thanks for hanging in there with me if you made it this far, and happy healing.